Okay guys, now we're going to go through the KPI summary sheet. There are no inputs for you to do at all. They all just suck in all the assumptions that you put in from across all the sheets and pull them together really neatly. So we can see up here, first we've got a financial summary, which starts with your bookings to your revenues, deducting all your costs, getting all the way down to your operating cash flow. You'll notice there's colors. What are these? Well, we use this thing called conditional formatting to show you the high and the low points for all these numbers, which is why at the end, the reds are deeper and the blues are brighter as well. How do you do that? Well, if you select your stuff up and go to conditional formatting, and I use this one here, that'll automatically do for you. It makes it look really cool. Another thing which we haven't talked about are spark lines, which are here. It shows you the trajectory of everything, like little mini graphs on each little line or row. And you can just see is anything looking a little bit weird. Like, why is there a little spike down here? Let's have a look. There is a deduction here. That must be that one of your year ends are happening, so you're making annual deductions. So you can pick that up by following your lines. So we have 12-month forecasts here, which are your forecasts, not your sort of financial year-end annuals or 12 months. And then monthly is all the way again for your 36. So we follow the financial section. The next section we have are your gross margins. We'll notice that your net income finally starts looking positive up right here. Fantastic, but otherwise you're losing money for quite a long time. The next part we have are your bookings. Now you'll see that things are grouped up. That's mainly for your basic, premium, and pro accounts, with the exception here, which is your paid versus earned traffic. Now your paid traffic is when you spend money to get people. Your earned traffic is when you do newsletters, social blog type stuff, right, which adds up and it sort of offset the money you need to spend in order to buy people through something like SEM. We'll just hide this here so we can focus on the headline numbers, but feel free to dig into it. Now we'll see we have our bookings, new customer ARPAs, contract lengths, etc., which is all good. We'll have our MRRs, our churns, expansion revenues to track your net new MRR, and your MRRs that you're getting for different types of packages. Then we'll see our churn metrics. So we'll see how many customers we're getting and what churn is happening on a customer basis, on a MRR basis, how much expansion is happening on MRR, so 1.1% here, and what your net MRR churn is. What's interesting to note is this starts out as a positive, which you think is good, but it's actually not. What we're going to do is get to fabled promised land of negative MRR churn. And this is because our expansion revenue is exceeding the amount that we're losing on churn. This is not normally realistic. There are many companies which do have it, and VCs totally love it if you can. Now, fantastic. We'll look at our unit economics. So we can see our LTV months, what our LTV customer churn is, and our MRR churn, what our acquisition costs are, and then the multiples of your LTV versus your CACs. So we do this on a customer and an MRR basis. This CAC is just taking your direct paid amount. The fully loaded version includes everything else related to your S&M. All right, so if you check out your S&M in your cost sheets, then you can see how much you're spending, and that includes things like your staff costs. We'll see that here. If you look, your LTV CACs are way above normal, right? You expect this to ideally be a minimum 3. So on a non-fully loaded basis, your numbers are pretty high, but on a fully loaded basis, your numbers are far lower and much more in line with what VCs will sort of be expecting to see. Now we'll see our months for cover CAC is how long does it take for you to cover the cost of acquiring your customers. In the next section we have our total trials, your cumulative trials, your new customers that are happening, what percentage of customers are coming out of trials. So here we see it's 16% and gets better over time to 21% and staying relatively consistent through that. And what your marketing leverage is. So how much you're really getting a bang of a buck from the marketing money that you're spending. It starts out pretty low, but it gets way better over time. Now we'll look at your funnel metrics. So how many visitors come to your website, how many then become trials, and then what are conversion ratios? So how many go from visitors to trial, from your trials to actually then purchasing is what you really would care about. And then your headcount staff. Now, these all will link to your different sheets, right? Every time you can see them like here. This links to your MRR and customer summary. So we can see formulas happening here. Now, for your annual versions, these formulas need to be a little bit different. So let me try and find something where it's been calculated differently. Here we go. Now, for your customer ARPA, what we're doing here is summarizing the next 12 months of your forecast and timesing it by 12, because your ARPA here is on a monthly basis and it needs to be annualized by timesing by 12. Now, if we look at your percentage of customer churn, what we're doing is we're taking your number of churn customers over the next 12 months, summating all of those, and dividing them by the average number of total customers. Now, why the average? Well, you don't know exactly what day your customers are coming on. So this averaging is effectively assuming that people come at a midpoint through that month, right? And so you're averaging this and kind of assuming you're not really getting the full value of people out of that. This is a much better assumption than just taking a sum of things. Now, the same thing is done with your percentage of MR churn and with your MR expansion. When we look at your net MR churn percentage, what's happening here is we're taking your churn, deducting the expansion revenue, and dividing it by the average of your starting MRR. Theoretically, we could also take an average between your starting MRR and your ending MRR, but we haven't done this here. It's not so much important as to exactly how you do it, but why you do it. And so long as you understand your assumptions, that's totally fine. The reality is there are so many different ways of calculating your assumptions. Just alone for CAC, someone did an analysis of public companies and found there were 40 different ways exactly people who were doing this. Now, if we look at our LTV MRR churn basis, this uses a max function here to make sure that it doesn't become 0. And if it is, it becomes 0 like this. But it's calculated on the annual and not just off the monthly numbers, because we wanted to understand what the implications are on the whole of it. And so we're taking your ARPA, we're timesing that by your gross profit margin and dividing it by your churn rate. And that will help us get to our MRR churn LTV. So follow the assumptions line by line for the annuals, and you'll find that the assumptions are actually different. Now that's our KPI summary sheet. It's got pretty much every single KPI you might want to have. One thing I did is I went to a very well-known VC called David Scott, who runs a website called For Entrepreneurs. And I made sure that all the KPIs that he had on his website were here. I also, for the most part, used the same assumptions that he did. For the annual calculations, pretty much no one has actually explained how to do this. So those aren't the same ones that he's done because he hasn't done them. But there is logic as to how they've been applied to the model. If you would like to have a different approach, feel free to change the way it's been calculated. Again, what's more important is knowing why you did it and how you did it, not so much what the numbers are, because again, they can be calculated in many different ways.